Scarlett Donovan had two lives, and she was failing at both of them. The first life happened inside the walls of Riverside High School, where she sat in the back corner of every classroom, wore the same black leather jacket regardless of the weather, and spoke to exactly no one. The other students had long since stopped trying. Freshman year, a girl named Brittany had invited Scarlett to a sleepover. Scarlett said yes, then panicked for 3 days, imagining the questions that would come. What does your dad do? Why do you live so far out? Is it true your house smells like engine grease? She never showed up. Brittany never asked again. Nobody did. The second life happened at the compound on Ridgeback Road, 11 miles outside of town, where the driveway was always lined with Harleys and the garage doors never fully closed, where men with leather vests and road-worn hands came and went at all hours, and where her father, Gunnar Donovan, president of the Hells Angels Desert chapter, held court at the kitchen table like a king who never asked for a throne. Scarlett loved her father the way you of a thunderstorm, with awe, with fear, with the knowledge that no matter how beautiful it is, it can level everything you care about in an instant. Her mother had understood that. Carolyn Donovan had married Gunnar when she was 22 and still believed people could change if you loved them hard enough. By 32, she knew better. Scarlett was 10 years old the morning she woke to find her mother's closet empty, the hangers swinging like bones in the wind. A note on the kitchen counter, 3 sentences long. I love you. I can't do this anymore. Please forgive me. 7 years later, Scarlett still carried that note in the inside pocket of her leather jacket. Not because she hadn't forgiven her mother, because she hadn't decided yet whether she wanted to. It was a Wednesday morning in November when Scarlett first really noticed Ethan Caldwell. She had seen him before, of course. Everyone had seen him without actually seeing him the way you see a fire hydrant or a mailbox. He was part of the scenery. Quiet kid back row, brown hair that needed cutting, clothes that were clean but tired. She knew his name from roll call and nothing else. But that Wednesday, Scarlett arrived at school early because her father's meeting the night before had been loud enough to keep her awake until 3 in the morning, and she figured if she couldn't sleep, she might as well get a head start on the history essays she had been avoiding. She was cutting through the gym when she heard the shower running. Not unusual. The basketball team practiced early on Wednesdays. But when she glanced through the cracked locker room door, she didn't see any basketball players. She saw Ethan Caldwell. Standing in the far shower stall, the one with the broken latch using a tiny bottle of hotel shampoo, his backpack sitting on the bench, with a Ziploc bag of toiletries balanced on top. She watched for exactly 3 seconds before she understood. Then she left, walked to the parking lot, and sat in her truck for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, thinking about a boy who had to shower at school because he didn't have a shower at home. Scarlett told no one what she saw that morning. Not her father, who would have tried to fix it with money and muscle. Not the school counselor, who would have filed a report and triggered a system that would chew Ethan up and spit him into foster care. Not anyone. Because Scarlett understood something about secrets that most people didn't, sometimes keeping. One was the kindest thing you could do. Over the next 3 weeks, Scarlett became a spy in her own school. Not the kind with gadgets and missions. The kind who sits quietly and watches because watching is safer than speaking, and because the person she was watching reminded her so much of herself that it physically hurt to look away. She saw Ethan arrive each morning in a different parking spot. Monday East lot, Tuesday West, Wednesday street parking. Thursday he somehow slipped into the teacher lot behind someone with a pass. Friday back to East. A rotation, a system designed to prevent anyone from noticing that the car was always there. She saw him eat lunch in that car every day. Free lunch from the cafeteria, always the same. Whatever the main was, an apple or fruit cup chocolate milk. He would sit in the driver's seat and eat slowly like he was trying to make it last. Sometimes she saw him tear off pieces of his sandwich and leave them on the pavement near the rear wheel. She thought he was being wasteful until she saw the cat. An orange tabby with a torn ear and a limp in his back leg that came every day around 12:30 like it had a calendar. She saw him rotate 3 shirts, gray with a bleach stain near the hem, blue with a frayed collar, black so faded it was almost purple. 3 shirts, 5 school days. Do the math. She saw him charge his phone at the outlet by the third-floor vending machine during study hall, the one most students didn't know about. She saw him use the bathroom at the McDonald's on 5th Street at 6 in the morning 3 times a week. She saw him park behind the old gym building on Wednesday nights, behind the abandoned strip mall, on Fridays in the hospital overflow lot on weekends. He lived in that car. He lived in a Honda Civic with a safety pin backpack and 3 shirts and a stray cat named after a constellation. And he came to school every single day like it was the most normal thing in the world. Scarlett didn't tell anyone. That was his business, his survival, and she understood survival better than most people gave her credit for. But she did something else instead. Something small and maybe stupid and definitely risky, because if he found out, he'd know someone was watching. She started leaving things in the gym locker he used. A bottle of shampoo, the good kind, not hotel size. A new toothbrush still in its packaging. Granola bars, a pair of thick socks because November was getting cold, and she'd seen his ankles bare above worn-out sneakers. She never left a note, never signed anything, just placed the items inside the locker before first period and walked away. The first time Ethan stood in front of the open locker for a full minute, she watched from around the corner, heart-hammering, terrified he'd be angry. Instead, he looked left, looked right, picked up the shampoo bottle and held it like it was something precious. Then he put it in his backpack, closed the locker, and walked to class. He never mentioned it, never asked around, just quietly accepted whatever appeared, and Scarlett quietly kept providing. It was the closest thing to friendship she had, which was pathetic, she knew. A friendship where neither person speaks to the other, where one gives in secret and the other receives in silence. But it was all she could manage. Scarlett Donovan did not make friends. Friends asked questions, and questions led to answers, and answers led to the compound on Ridgeback Road, where 300 bikers called her daddy's house home base. Meanwhile, Ethan Caldwell's world was a carefully constructed routine built on the foundation of not being seen. Every morning began the same way. The alarm on his phone at 5:45. The slow unfolding of a body that had spent the night compressed into a space never meant for sleeping. The crack of his neck, his knees, his lower back. The inventory check phone, charged clothes for the day, backpack intact enough gas to get to school and back to wherever he'd parked that night. Then the McDonald's on 5th Street. The bathroom with the fluorescent light that buzzed like a dying insect. The tired-looking man mopping the floor who never said a word. The ritual of brushing teeth, washing face, checking the mirror for any sign that might give him away. Dark circles, sure. Everyone had dark circles. Hair too long, but lots of guys let their hair grow. The bleach stain on his shirt, but he kept his backpack low to cover it. He was 17 years old, and every single day was an exercise in camouflage. His mother had died 8 months ago. Overdose. The needle was still in her arm when he found her on the bathroom floor of their apartment. He had called 911, answered the questions, signed in the forms, watched them take her body away in a bag that was the same gray as the shirt he was wearing right now. The one with the bleach stain. The bag had a zipper that made a sound Ethan heard every night when he closed his eyes. A metallic whisper that meant gone. Final. Over. He had not cried at the funeral because there was no funeral. He couldn't afford one. The state cremated her and gave him the ashes in a cardboard box that he kept in the glove compartment of the Civic. Sometimes on the worst nights, he would open the glove compartment and rest his hand on the box and tell her about his day, about the HVAC class, about the cat, about the girl in the leather jacket who never talked to anyone. He knew it was pathetic. He also knew it was the only thing keeping him sane. 3 days after her death, while he was at school, trying to hold himself together through an algebra test, the landlord changed the locks. Everything Ethan owned was inside that apartment. Clothes, photos, his mother's jewelry, The acceptance letter from the community college that was the only proof he had that someone somewhere thought he might amount to something. He went to the landlord's office. The man behind the desk looked at him the way people look at something stuck to their shoe. Your mother owed 4 months' rent. You're a minor. I can't lease to you. The buildings have been cleaned out. Your stuff is gone. Gone. Like his mother. Like his childhood. Like any pretense that the world was a place that cared whether Ethan Caldwell lived or died. He had an older brother, Colton, somewhere in Colorado. They hadn't spoken in 6 months. Colton had left home at 18, back when their mother's addiction was still manageable, back when needles were still hidden in drawers instead of left in arms. He'd told Ethan he needed distance, space, room to breathe without the weight of their mother's choices pressing down on his chest. Ethan understood. He understood so well it felt like a knife between his ribs. Colton had saved himself. Nobody blamed him for that. But understanding why someone leaves doesn't make the empty chair any easier to look at. Ethan could have called him, could have asked for help, but asking for help meant admitting he couldn't survive alone, and surviving alone was the only thing Ethan had left to be proud of. So he moved into the Honda Civic, learned the geography of invisibility, figured out which gas station bathrooms stayed unlocked, which parking lots the police patrolled, which fast food places had outlets near the booze, how to sleep sitting up, how to make a Bauhaus granola bars last 5 days, how to be present in a school of 1,500 students without anyone noticing that when the final bell rang, he didn't go home because he didn't have one. The HVAC repair program was his lifeline. 8 more months and he'd have a certificate. A certificate meant a job. A job meant money. Money meant walls, a door that locked a bed that didn't fold him in half. Sometimes on the worst nights when the cold crept through the car doors and his back ached from the awkward angle and his stomach growled because lunch had been 7 hours ago and there was nothing until morning, he'd close his eyes and picture it. A room with a heater, a refrigerator with food in it, a shower he didn't have to share with a basketball team. Simple things, impossible things. But then he'd wake up at 5:45, unfold himself from the car, crack his neck and his knees and his back, and do it all over again. Because quitting wasn't an option. Quitting was the needle in the arm. Quitting was the empty eyes in the mirror. Quitting was the thing that killed his mother, and Ethan Caldwell refused to die the same way. It was in second period HVAC theory that Ethan first noticed something wrong with Brody Hale. Brody sat 1 row up and 3 seats to the left. He was a big kid, used to be bigger when he played football. That was before his father went to prison for armed robbery, before his girlfriend posted those texts online, before the whole school seemed to decide that Brody Hale was either a joke or a threat, depending on who you asked. He'd quit football in October, quit talking to people around the same time, quit everything except showing up and sitting in his seat and staring at nothing. Ethan recognized the stare. He'd worn it himself for the first month after his mother died. The look of someone drowning in shallow water while everyone walked past on the shore. But today was different. Today Brody wasn't just staring. He was tapping his pencil against the desk in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Tap, 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 like a metronome counting down to something only he could hear. His eyes were focused on the middle distance, locked on a point in the air that didn't exist. And when the teacher called his name to answer a question, Brody didn't flinch, didn't blink, just kept tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan told himself it was nothing. People zone out. People have bad days. People lose themselves in their heads when the world outside their heads gets too loud. He told himself all of this, and none of it stuck because there was something behind Brody's eyes that wasn't sadness or anger or emptiness. It was decision. The look of someone who has already chosen the ending and is just waiting for the story to catch up. At lunch, Ethan sat in his car and fed chicken to Orion and tried to forget about Brody's eyes. The cat purred against his leg, a small engine of warmth in a world that had gone cold. Ethan had found Orion 3 weeks ago limping behind the dumpster near the east lot, one ear, torn back leg dragging. The cat had looked at him with the wary eyes of something that had been hurt too many times to trust easily. Ethan understood that look. He'd been wearing it for months. He'd started sharing his lunch meat, small pieces at first torn from the edges of whatever the cafeteria gave him. The cat would take the food and retreat to a safe distance. Eat, watch, approach again, take more food, retreat again. Over 3 weeks, the distance between them had shrunk from 10 feet to 2. Now Orion would press against Ethan's calf and purr. And Ethan would talk to him in a low voice about nothing in particular, and for 5 minutes a day, neither of them was alone. He'd named the cat Orion because on the first night they met, the constellation had been brilliant overhead, and Ethan needed to believe in something bigger than a parking lot and a car that smelled like loneliness. The November sun sat low and pale in the sky. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. Then he saw Brody's car, silver Honda Accord parked in the far corner of the east lot where the cameras didn't quite reach. Ethan knew that spot. He'd used it himself a dozen times. It was the spot you chose when you didn't want to be seen. Brody was sitting behind the wheel, engine running, not on his phone, not eating, not doing anything a 17-year-old should be doing during lunch period. Just sitting, staring at the school building, his face was completely still, like it had been carved from something cold. His hands were on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, like he was waiting for a signal to drive somewhere. Something cold crawled up Ethan's spine, the same feeling he'd had the night he found his mother. The feeling that sat in your chest like a stone and whispered the thing you didn't want to hear: something is very wrong. Brody sat there for 20 minutes. Then the engine revved and the Accord pulled away slowly, too slowly, like the car itself was reluctant to leave. Ethan watched until it disappeared around the corner. He couldn't eat after that. The chicken tasted like cardboard. Orion meowed for more, but Ethan's hands were shaking too badly to tear the meat. That night, parked behind the old gym building in his Wednesday spot, Ethan was trying to finish his history homework by phone flashlight when the text arrived. Unknown number. No name, no area code he recognized. He almost deleted it. Almost. His thumb was on the trash icon when something made him stop. Call it instinct. Call it the same gut feeling that made him watch Brody in the parking lot. Call it the universe throwing him one last warning before the world caught fire. He opened the message. It was a photograph. A car trunk open photograph from above. Inside, laid out with terrible neatness, was a long black rifle case. Next to it, 3 boxes of ammunition arranged in a row. Below the photo, a text message appeared, letter by letter, like the sender was typing in real time. I'm sorry you have to see this. You were one of the good ones. Don't come to school tomorrow. Please. Ethan's hands were shaking so violently, the phone nearly flew from his grip. He read the message 3 times, 4, 5. Each time the words got worse. Each time the photo got clearer. The rifle case had a padlock on it, silver catching the light from whatever was illuminating the trunk. The ammunition boxes were Winchester brand. There was a receipt tucked under one of them, but the angle made it unreadable. He tried to call the number. Dead. Tried again. Nothing. The number existed only long enough to deliver its message, then vanished like smoke. His thumb hovered over the 3 numbers that could change everything. 9, 1, 1. What if he was wrong? What if this was a prank? Some sick kid with a stock photo and a burner phone trying to scare people for laughs. What if he called the police and they traced the tip to a homeless kid living in his car? And instead of investigating the threat, they investigated him. What if they found out about the car, about the no address, about the dead mother and the absent brother, and the whole fragile architecture of his survival? But then he saw Brody's face, those empty eyes, that car in the parking lot staring at the school like it was already a target, that pencil tapping like a countdown. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan pressed the numbers. The 911 operator answered on the second ring. Her voice was calm and professional and completely unaware that the person on the other end was a 17-year-old boy sitting in a car that was also his bedroom, reporting a threat he prayed was imaginary. He told her everything: the text, the photo, Brody's behavior, the parking lot, the empty eyes, the pencil. He talked until his throat was raw and his voice was cracking, and the operator had asked him to repeat himself 3 times because his words kept tripping over each other. 2 police officers met him at the station 40 minutes later. They were professional, thorough. They asked questions Ethan didn't have answers to. How do you know this student? Has he made any direct threats before? Do you have any other evidence? They photographed the text message, took screenshots, wrote everything down in notebooks with deliberate handwriting. One of them, a woman with kind eyes and a wedding ring, she kept turning on her finger, patted his good shoulder. You did the right thing, son. We'll have the school resource officer speak with him first thing in the morning. We take these things seriously. The other officer, older with a mustache going gray at the edges, handed Ethan a card. If you think of anything else, call this number directly. Don't hesitate, he paused. You got somewhere safe to stay tonight. Ethan almost laughed. The most dangerous question anyone could ask him. Yes, sir, he lied. The same lie he told everyone. The lie that kept the system from swallowing him whole. Ethan wanted to believe them, wanted to feel the relief that should come from doing the right thing. Instead, he felt like he'd pulled the pin on a grenade and had no idea how far he'd thrown it. The image of Brody's face kept surfacing, those dead eyes behind the steering wheel, and Ethan wondered if the police would reach him in time. Wondered if the morning would bring answers or devastation. Wondered if he just painted a target on his own back. He spent the rest of the night parked across the street from the police station in the 24-hour diner parking lot. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. The image of the rifle case burned behind his eyelids every time he closed them. The words played on loop. You were one of the good ones. Past tense. Like Brody was already writing the obituary. At 5:30 in the morning, Ethan gave up pretending. He bought 2 energy drinks from the diner vending machine and drove to school. Parked in his Wednesday spot, watched the sun come up orange and cold over the roofline of Riverside High. Other cars started arriving, teachers with their coffee cups and briefcases, walking with the unhurried pace of people who believed today would be like every other day. Early students in their parents' SUVs, backpacks slung over one shoulder, earbuds and faces illuminated by phone screens. The maintenance crew with their thermoses and work boots unlocking side entrances, turning on lights. The ordinary machinery of a school day grinding into motion. Ethan watched each car that entered the lot, checked the make, the color, the driver, waiting for a silver Honda Accord that he prayed would never come. At 7:15, a police car pulled into the lot. The school resource officer, a stocky man named Briggs, who always stood by the front entrance with his arms crossed like a bouncer at a club. Nobody wanted to get into, went inside with the principal. Their faces were serious, heads close together, the principal's hand on Briggs's shoulder. Something was happening. Something had been set in motion. Brody's silver Accord never appeared. First period was American history. Mr. Brennan was talking about the Great Depression, about breadlines and Hoovervilles and families who lost everything overnight. How a nation built on the promise of prosperity watched that promise turn to ash. How people who had homes woke up one morning and didn't. How invisible armies of the forgotten gathered in tent cities along railroad tracks, waiting for a savior who was slow to arrive. Ethan sat in his back corner and almost laughed. He was living in a Hooverville right now. Population 1. No tent, just a Honda Civic with a broken heater and a glove compartment full of ashes. Mr. Brennan's lecture was a history lesson for everyone else. For Ethan, it was a mirror. Scarlett walked past his desk on the way to her seat. 3 rows up left side, always the same spot. She glanced at him as she passed. Not long enough to be an invitation. just long enough to confirm he was still there, still breathing, still wearing the gray shirt with the bleach stain. He noticed she was wearing a new bracelet, thin silver chain with a small charm he couldn't make out from this distance. He wondered who gave it to her. Then he wondered why he was wondering. The morning crawled. Brody's name came over the PA system at 8:47. Brody Hale. Please report to the main office. Brody Hale to the main office, please. The whispers started instantly. What did he do? Is he in trouble, I heard. He hasn't been in class for a week. Brody never appeared. Second period, HVAC, AC theory. Ethan tried to focus on compressor cycles and refrigerant pressures, but his mind kept replaying the photograph. The rifle case, the ammunition, the silver padlock. You were one of the good ones. At lunch, Ethan took his tray from the cafeteria and headed for the parking lot. He was halfway across the blacktop tray, balanced on one hand, when someone said his name. Ethan. He turned. Scarlett Donovan was standing 4 feet away. Up close, he could see her tattoo clearly for the first time. Wings, spreading from her collarbone up toward her jawline, feathered and detailed, like someone had trapped a bird beneath her skin, and it was trying to get out. Her eyes were dark brown, so dark they were almost black, and they were looking at him with an intensity that made the hair on his arm stand up. You okay? She asked. You look like someone walked over your grave. He didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know this girl. Had never exchanged more than accidental eye contact across a classroom. But something about the way she was looking at him, not through him, not past him, but directly at him, like he was the only thing in the parking lot worth seeing, made something crack in his chest. I'm fine. She didn't move. Her arms were crossed over her leather jacket and her weight was shifted to one hip, and she looked like she had no intention of going anywhere until she got an answer that wasn't a lie. I know you're not fine, she said. I've seen you, Ethan. I know where you sleep. His blood went cold. Every survival instinct he had honed over 8 months screamed at him to run, to deny, to disappear into the crowd and rotate to a new parking spot and never look at this girl again. I'm not going to tell anyone, she said, reading the panic on his face. I've known for 3 weeks. If I was going to tell, I would have already. 3 weeks. She'd known for 3 weeks and said nothing, done nothing, except the shampoo, the toothbrush, the granola bars, the socks. That was you, he said. In the locker. Something flickered across her face, not quite a smile, more like the shadow of one. My dad's friend is a cop, she said, and the shadow vanished. He mentioned a student called in a tip last night about a potential threat. Didn't give a name, but I put it together. How? Because you're the only person in this entire school who would actually care enough to call. Everyone else would post about it online and move on. You actually did something. They stood there in the parking lot, surrounded by the sounds of a normal school day. Car doors slamming. Music from someone's speakers. Laughter from a group of freshmen who had no idea that the world was balanced on a knife's edge. Was I right to call? Ethan asked. His voice cracked on the last word. What if I'm wrong? What if I just destroyed his life over nothing? Scarlett's expression softened. Not pity, something harder than pity, something that looked like it came from experience. My dad always says, trust your gut. Your gut was screaming. Wasn't it? Ethan nodded. Then you did the right thing. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a card. Black with silver lettering. Reaper's Customs Motorcycle Repair. In the corner, a logo Ethan recognized from news stories and late-night documentaries. My dad owns a bike shop, Scarlett said. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call that number. Ethan took the card. His fingers were numb despite the November sun. Why are you helping me? Because you're one of the good ones. His heart stopped. Those were the exact words from the text message. The exact words. And there aren't enough of us left. Scarlett finished. She walked away before he could respond. Her leather jacket caught the sunlight and threw it back in pieces. Ethan stood in the parking lot holding a business card and a lunch tray, and the sudden terrifying knowledge that someone had seen through every wall he built. He sat in his car and tried to eat, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The pizza went cold. Orion appeared at the rear wheel meowing, and Ethan tore off a piece of crust but couldn't manage more. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different from last night. Local area code. He opened it, a link to Instagram. Brody Hale's account, the account that hadn't posted anything in 3 weeks. There was a new story, posted 4 minutes ago. Ethan tapped it. The video was shaky, filmed in what looked like the front seat of a car. Brody's face filled the screen. He looked worse than Ethan had ever seen him. Eyes red and swollen face the color of old paper, hands trembling as he held the phone. His lips were chapped and cracked, and when he spoke, his voice came out flat, emptied of everything that made it human. I know someone called the cops. I know they're looking for me. I know they think they stopped something. He paused, looked away from the camera towards something off-screen. When he looked back, there was something in his eyes that made Ethan's blood solidify in his veins. Not anger, not sadness, certainty. They didn't. The video cut to black. Ethan's hands were shaking so badly he had to use both thumbs to dial 911. The operator was different from last night. He tried to explain. The words came out jumbled, overlapping, desperate. Video, Instagram, Brody Hale. He's coming. He said they didn't stop him. The operator told him to stay calm, said she was dispatching officers to Brody's last known address and to the school as a precaution. Asked Ethan where he was. At school, Riverside High. I'm in the parking lot. Stay there. Officers are en route. Ethan hung up and stared at the school building. Thought about all the people inside. Mr. Brennan drawing diagrams on the whiteboard. The freshmen laughing by the vending machines. Scarlett, who was probably in the cafeteria right now. Scarlett, who knew his secret and kept it. Scarlett, who left shampoo in his locker like a prayer she couldn't say out loud. Third period started in 10 minutes. He should go inside. Should warn people. Should do something more than sit in a car with a cold pizza and a terrified cat. But his body was concrete. Fear had poured into his muscles and hardened there. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch the minutes tick past on his phone. 12:47, 12:48, 12:49. At 12:52, movement at the edge of the parking lot. Silver Honda Accord, driving slowly, too slowly, like the driver was scanning, searching. The car pulled into a spot near the B-wing entrance. Engine cut. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Just Brody sitting behind the wheel, perfectly still, staring at the building. Then the driver's door opened. Brody got out. He was wearing all black, an oversized jacket despite the warm November air. His right hand was inside the jacket, pressed against his body, holding something that made the fabric bulge at an unnatural angle. Ethan's brain registered what his heart already knew. His hand found the door handle, and then he saw Scarlett. She had just walked out of the B-wing entrance, phone in her hand, heading toward the parking lot, walking directly into the space between Brody and the school like she was crossing a stage without knowing the play had already begun. She hadn't seen Brody. Brody hadn't seen her. They were on a collision course, and Ethan Caldwell was the only person alive who understood what was about to happen. His hand closed on the door handle. The exit was right there. 10 steps to the right, past the chain-link fence across the street, and gone. He could run. He should run. Every survival lesson he'd learned in 8 months of homelessness told him to run. But Scarlett was walking toward a bullet she couldn't see, and Ethan's legs carried him out of the car across the pavement toward her, away from safety, toward the danger, toward the girl who left shampoo in his locker because she couldn't bring herself to say the words out loud. He ran. The car door flew open and his feet hit pavement, and the world narrowed to a tunnel. Scarlett at the end of it. Everything else, the other cars, the buildings, the sky fell away like scenery from a train window. There was only her, only the distance closing between them, Only the sound of his own breathing and the slap of his shoes on asphalt, and somewhere deep in his chest a voice saying she can't die. Not her. Not today. Brody's hand came out of his jacket. The rifle was black and longer than Ethan expected. It caught the November sun and threw a bar of light across the pavement like a blade. Brody raised it toward the entrance, toward Scarlett. His face was blank. Not angry, not seethed, not anything. Just a machine shaped like a boy pointing a weapon at a girl who was looking at her phone and didn't know that in 3 seconds, her life would either end or change forever. Scarlett, Ethan's voice ripped from his throat, raw and desperate and loud enough to carry across the entire parking lot. She looked up, saw him sprinting toward her. Confusion crossed her face first, then concern, then something else, as her eyes tracked past him to the figure near the B-wing door. The first shot split the air. The sound was nothing like television. It was sharper, louder, a physical force that punched Ethan's eardrums and made his teeth vibrate. Concrete exploded near the entrance, chips of stone and dust spraying outward in a gray cloud. Scarlett dropped to the ground. Survival instinct. Smart. The kind of reflex you develop when you grow up in a house where danger is always one room away. Brody was walking now, not running. Walking with a terrible mechanical purpose, each step measured the rifle held at waist height, his face empty of everything except the decision he'd made long before this moment. He was walking toward the entrance, toward Scarlett, who was crawling behind a concrete planter, her leather jacket scraping against the ground. Ethan changed direction, cut left toward the side entrance. His lungs were burning. His vision was narrowing. Every cell in his body was screaming at him to turn around, to run the other way, to choose the life he'd fought so hard to keep. But his legs kept carrying him forward through the side door, into the hallway, into the fluorescent nightmare of a school under siege. The second shot came from inside the building. The sound bounced off the concrete walls, multiplied, became everywhere and nowhere at once. Screaming erupted from every direction. The animal sound of raw terror. Students running in blind panic, slamming into each other, trampling backpacks and dropping phones, and becoming a stampede of adrenaline and fear. A freshman girl hit Ethan so hard they both nearly went down. She bounced off his chest and kept running, her eyes wide and white and seeing nothing. Her backpack lay on the floor where it had fallen, pink with cartoon characters on it. A child's backpack in a war zone. The B-wing hallway stretched ahead of him, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they did every day. Lockers on both sides, some decorated with stickers and photos, evidence of normal lives that had existed 5 minutes ago. The smell of floor wax and industrial cleaner, and underneath it, something metallic and new that Ethan's brain refused to identify. He saw Scarlett, 20 feet ahead, standing at her open locker, her back to the main corridor. She'd made it inside somehow, through the entrance, through the chaos, but now she was frozen. Phone in her hand, face white as paper, not moving, not running, just standing there like the fear had short-circuited something essential and left her body running on nothing. Behind her, at the intersection of the two hallways, Brody rounded the corner. Time stretched. Each second became a photograph. Scarlett's trembling hand. The combination on her open locker, 14-22-8. The poster on the wall behind her advertising the winter formal December 15th tickets, $20. The rifle in Brody's hands. Black metal under fluorescent light. His finger on the trigger. The exit door was to Ethan's right, 10 feet. 3 steps and a push bar, and he'd be outside and alive and running and safe. Scarlett was 20 feet ahead. Brody was 30 feet beyond her and closing. The math was simple. The exit was closer. Safety was closer. Survival was right there, close enough to taste. Ethan's legs carried him toward Scarlett. He didn't think, I'm going to be a hero. Didn't think this is the right thing to do. Didn't think about the Honda Civic or the HVAC certificate or the 6 months until graduation. He thought she can't die. Simple as gravity. Undeniable as sunrise. The third shot hit a locker 5 feet to his left. The metal buckled inward like a fist had punched it from the inside. The sound was a physical blow that made his vision flash white. Scarlet. He screamed it again because her name was the only word left in him. She turned. Saw him running at her. Her eyes went huge. She started to raise her hand, maybe to wave him away, maybe to reach for him. He didn't slow down. He hit her like a linebacker, wrapped both arms around her waist, and used his forward momentum to throw them both sideways. They hit the floor hard. His elbow cracked against tile and pain shot up to his shoulder, but he was already moving, scrambling, pulling her with him, dragging them both toward any door, any shelter, anything with walls. Janitor's closet, 5 feet away, door slightly open, a sliver of darkness that looked like salvation. The fourth shot found him. The bullet entered his left shoulder from behind. It was hot and sharp and wrong, like someone had pressed a heated railroad spike through his skin and into the muscle beneath. His arm went dead instantly, completely numb from shoulder to fingertips, like it had been disconnected from his body. He looked down and saw red spreading across his gray shirt. The bleach stain vanished under the blood, dark and wet and growing fast. He'd been shot. The thought arrived from a great distance, clinical and cold like a news report about someone else's tragedy. He'd been shot, and his arm didn't work, and the blood was warm against his skin, and Scarlett was screaming something he couldn't hear because his ears were ringing so loud the world had gone underwater. But he got his good hand on her arm, got his fingers around her wrist, pulled. They crashed through the closet door together, mops and buckets and the sharp chemical smell of industrial cleaner. A space barely big enough for two bodies. Ethan slammed the door shut with his foot and pressed his spine against it. No lock, just a handle. He braced his feet against the metal shelving unit across from him and pushed his back against the door with everything he had. His shoulder was screaming now, the numbness giving way to pain that was liquid and hot and seemed to have its own pulse. Scarlett was breathing in short, panicked gasps. "Oh my God," she was saying. "Oh my God. Oh my God." Her hands were in front of her, covered in blood. His blood, from where she grabbed his arm. "Quiet," Ethan gasped. "Please, quiet." She clamped both hands over her mouth. Her eyes above her fingers were enormous, dark brown moons in a face drained of color. She was looking at his shoulder, at the blood soaking through his shirt and pooling on the floor beneath him. A growing puddle of red on white tile. The door handle rattled against his spine. Someone was on the other side. Someone was pushing. Ethan pushed back. His feet slid on the tile and the shelving unit scraped backward an inch. 2 inches. The door cracked open. Through the gap, 6 inches of fluorescent hallway light. And an eye. Brody's eye. Bloodshot. Empty. Looking directly at Ethan with the flat disinterest of someone watching television. The gun barrel slid through the crack. Black metal. 6 inches from Ethan's face. Close enough to see the scratches on the barrel. Close enough to feel the cold radiating off the steel. This was it. This was how he died. In a janitor's closet, bleeding out on dirty tile. After 8 months of surviving in a car. After getting so close to the finish line, he could almost see it. After finally having someone see him. "I see you," Ethan said. The words came from somewhere deep. Somewhere that hadn't been touched by the fear or the pain or the survival instinct screaming at him to be silent. Somewhere that remembered what it felt like to be invisible. To scream without being heard. To drown in shallow water while the world walked past. "I know you're in pain," Ethan said. His voice was shaking. Blood was running down his arm in a steady stream, now dripping off his fingertips onto the tile. "I know you feel invisible. I know what it's like when nobody hears you." The gun barrel didn't move. "I called the cops last night," Ethan continued. "Not because I wanted you in trouble, because I didn't want you to die, because I didn't want this." The eye blinked just once. A slow, deliberate blink like something deep behind Brody's emptiness had registered the words. "It doesn't have to end like this," Ethan whispered. Sirens, distant but growing, the wail of police cars approaching, cutting through the silence like a blade through cloth. Getting closer, getting louder. Brody's hand on the gun trembled. The barrel wavered. Through the crack, Ethan could see the muscles in Brody's forearm tightening, relaxing, tightening again. The finger on the trigger was white at the knuckle. Behind Ethan, Scarlett was pressed against his back. He could feel her shaking, could feel her breath hot against his neck, could feel her hands gripping the back of his shirt like she was holding him together, keeping him from falling apart, keeping his blood from leaking out onto the floor. The siren screamed closer, a block away, maybe less. Brody's eye met Ethan's one last time through the crack, and for a fraction of a second something flickered there. Not redemption, not peace, just the smallest spark of recognition. One invisible boy seeing another. The gun pulled back. Footsteps, running, getting quieter, moving away from them down the hallway toward the administration wing, toward whatever ending Brody had written for himself long before this day. Ethan didn't move, couldn't move. The adrenaline was draining from his body like water from a cracked glass, and everything it had been holding back rushed in to fill the space. Pain, exhaustion, terror, the kind of shaking that starts in your hands and spreads to your whole body until you feel like you're vibrating apart. "Ethan," Scarlett's voice right in his ear, "you're bleeding really bad." "I know. Why did you do that?" She was crying. He could feel the tears hitting his neck. "You should have run. The exit was right there. You could have gotten away. Couldn't leave you. Simple." True. The truest thing he'd ever said. The sirens were right outside now. Multiple vehicles, screeching tires, doors slamming, voices shouting commands in the clipped language of crisis. Somewhere distant from the other end of the school, a single shot. Then silence. Final and complete. Scarlett's arms tightened around him from behind. She was holding him like she could stop what was happening through sheer force of will. Like if she held tight enough, his blood would stay inside his body and his heart would keep beating and the world would stop being the terrible thing it had become. "Stay with me," she was saying. "Please stay with me." Ethan wanted to tell her he was fine. Wanted to tell her it was just a shoulder wound. People survived shoulder wounds all the time. But his tongue was thick and his vision was going soft at the edges, the fluorescent light above them blooming into a haze that was almost beautiful. Boots, heavy, running. The door exploded open and Ethan fell backward into Scarlett's arms. They both went down. Men in black tactical gear filled the doorway. Helmets, shields, weapons drawn. Commands barking and voices trained to be louder than panic. Ethan tried to raise his hands. His right one went up. His left arm was dead weight hanging at his side, the sleeve soaked through and dripping. He shot. Scarlett was screaming. "He saved me. He's not the shooter. He saved my life." Hands in tactical gloves found his shoulder. Ethan screamed, couldn't stop it. The pain went white and hot and filled every corner of his body. "We need a medic in here." GSW to the left shoulder. Through and through, Ethan's eyes were closing. He fought against it, fought against the darkness pulling at the edges of his vision. Saw Scarlett's face above him, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Her dark eyes filled with something fierce and terrified and real. "Don't you dare," she said. "Don't you dare die on me." Not planning on it, he tried to say, but it came out as a breath, a whisper, a prayer to nobody in particular. The world tilted. Sounds went muffled like someone had wrapped the universe in cotton. He saw more uniforms. Saw someone place an oxygen mask over his face. Saw Scarlett being pulled away by a paramedic, her arms stretching toward him, fingers reaching, refusing to let go until the very last second. The last thing Ethan thought before everything went black was that for the first time in 8 months, someone was holding his hand. Someone was choosing not to let go. And that somehow, against all logic and reason and probability, was enough. Ethan woke to white ceiling tiles and the steady mechanical heartbeat of machines. His mouth tasted like metal and cotton, and something chemical that coated his tongue and made swallowing feel like pushing sand through a straw. His left shoulder was wrapped so tightly he could barely feel it, which he understood was a gift because the parts he could feel were announcing themselves with the enthusiasm of a fire alarm that had no intention of stopping. A face appeared above him, a woman in blue scrubs with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and the kind of eyes that had seen too many patients and still somehow hadn't gone cold. Welcome back, Ethan. I'm Dr. Whitfield. You're at Mercy General Hospital. You've been in surgery for about 3 hours. Do you know what happened? The memories didn't come back gently. They came back like a wave. The hallway, the fluorescent lights, Scarlett frozen at her locker, the rifle, the sound, the closet door rattling against his spine, Brody's eye through the crack, the gun barrel 6 inches from his face, blood on tile. Brody Ethan croaked. Is he? The shooter is dead, Dr. Whitfield said. Her voice was gentle but direct, the way you tell someone something terrible while trying not to make it worse. Self-inflicted gunshot wound in the administration building. He didn't hurt anyone else after you intervened. After you intervened. The words hung in the air, clinical and precise and carrying a weight that Ethan wasn't ready to hold. How many? He asked, even though the question felt like swallowing glass. 3 fatalities, 2 students and 1 teacher, 7 injured, including you. Names attached themselves to numbers in Ethan's head. Faces he might have passed in the hallway. The freshman girl who hit him while running the one with the pink backpack. Was she one of them? The teacher, was it? Mr. Brennan, who taught him about the Great Depression just hours before the world proved it was still capable of depressions of a different kind. He didn't ask. Couldn't ask. Knowing the names would make it real in a way he wasn't ready for. The numbers were heavy enough. 3 people had gone to school that morning and would never come home. Their families were somewhere in this hospital right now, or somewhere worse, sitting in living rooms that would never feel the same learning that ordinary had ended forever. And Ethan was lying in a bed with a bandaged shoulder and a heartbeat, and the terrible burning knowledge that he was alive because he chose to run toward the bullets, and not because the bullets chose to miss him. The bullet went clean through your shoulder, doctor. Whitfield continued checking something on the monitor beside his bed. Missed the subclavian artery by about 2 centimeters. Missed the bone entirely. You lost a significant amount of blood, which is why you lost consciousness. But the surgical repair was straightforward. You're going to be sore for a while. Physical therapy will be necessary, but you'll recover fully. Fully. Like a shoulder wound was something you recovered from fully. Like the bullet left a hole only in the muscle and not in every other part of you. There's someone who's been waiting to see you, Dr. Whitfield said. She arrived while you were in surgery and has refused to leave. Hospital policy restricts visitation to family members, but she made a very compelling argument. The doctor's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Something about describing in detail what would happen to my car if I didn't let her in. She's quite fierce. The door opened and Scarlett appeared. She looked smaller than she had in the hallway. Her leather jacket was gone, replaced by a hospital blanket wrapped around her shoulders like a shawl. Her hair was tangled and there was a smudge of something dark on her cheek that might have been dust from the hallway floor or might have been dried blood. His blood. Her eyes were swollen from crying, red-rimmed and raw, and when they found his face, something in them broke open. She crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed his good hand with both of hers. Her fingers were cold, shaking. You're awake, her voice cracked on the second word. You've been out for 6 hours. I thought. She stopped, swallowed hard. Her jaw tightened like she was physically holding back the rest of that sentence. Don't ever do that again. Do what? Take a bullet for me. Tears were running down her face now, cutting clean tracks through the dust and the fear and the hours of waiting. She wasn't wiping them away, wasn't trying to hide them, just letting them fall like she'd made peace with the fact that some things couldn't be held back. You should have run, she said. You were closer to the exit. You could have gotten away. Ethan squeezed her hand. We already had this conversation. In the closet, remember? Yeah, well, I'm having it again. She sat down hard in the chair next to his bed but didn't release his hand. She held it like an anchor. Like if she let go one or both of them might drift away into whatever dark place the day had tried to send them. The police want to talk to you, she said after a moment. And the news and about 50 people keep calling the hospital trying to get through. There's a video. What video? Someone filmed you from one of the classroom windows. You can see you running across the parking lot, then inside, then pulling me into the closet. She paused. It's already got 2 million views. Ethan closed his eyes. Great. Now he was viral. The homeless kid who got shot was trending. His face, his bloodied shirt, his desperate sprint across a parking lot, all of it compressed into a 30-second clip for strangers to watch while eating breakfast. Ethan, Scarlett's voice got quieter, more careful. They asked me for your emergency contact, for your family. His stomach dropped, the freefall sensation of a secret about to hit the ground. I didn't know what to tell them, she continued. So I just said, I'd stay until you woke up. But they need an address for when you were discharged. They need somewhere to send you. Here it was, the moment he'd been running from for 8 months. The moment where the camouflage failed and the walls came down and everything he'd built out of routine and silence, and the sheer stubborn refusal to ask for help collapsed under the weight of a single question. Where do you live? I don't have an address, Ethan said quietly. He was looking at the ceiling because looking at her felt impossible. What do you mean? I mean, I don't have a home, Scarlett. I live in my car, have been for 8 months. Since my mom died and I couldn't make rent. The silence that followed was heavy enough to have its own gravity. It pulled everything in the room toward it. The beeping of the heart monitor, the hum of the fluorescent light, the distant sounds of a hospital trying to function normally on a day that was anything but. Ethan waited for the pity, the wide eyes, the oh my God, the cascade of sympathy that would be worse than the bullet because sympathy meant being seen as broken, and being seen as broken meant being put into a system that would decide his fate for him. But Scarlett didn't say, oh my God. She didn't gasp. She didn't pull her hand away. She squeezed it tighter. How long have you known, he asked, that I was sleeping in the parking lot? About 3 weeks. I recognized your car. You always parked in different spots. Took me a while to figure out why. She paused. And I saw the shampoo in the locker room. And you didn't tell anyone. Why would I tell anyone? It's your business. Her voice was steady now. The tears had stopped, replaced by something harder. Not anger, determination. But Ethan, you've been living in a car for 8 months and you still ran toward a shooter to save me. You had nothing. You've been surviving completely alone and you still chose to protect me. Her voice broke on the last word, the determination cracking just enough to let the emotion through. Why? Why would you risk everything when you already had so little? Ethan finally looked at her. Her face was a mess, blotchy from crying, dust in her hair, blood on the hospital blanket around her shoulders. She was the most real thing he'd ever seen, because everyone deserves someone who shows up for them. The words landed in the space between them and sat there heavy and true. And nobody's ever shown up for you, have they? Scarlett whispered. Before today, nobody's shown up. How did you? I recognize it. The way you don't talk to anyone, the way you eat lunch alone, the leather jacket even when it's warm because it's armor. She paused. You're invisible too, Ethan. Just better dressed. He almost smiled. Almost. I need to call my dad, she said, pulling out her phone. He's been texting every 5 minutes since the news broke. He's going to lose his mind when I tell him everything. Tell him what that the boy who saved my life is homeless and has nowhere to go. She was already dialing. My dad doesn't forget when someone protects family, she said. Ever, the phone rang once. One single ring before a voice answered so fast it must have been waiting with the phone already in hand. Scarlett, tell me you're okay. Scarlett flinched at the name. I'm okay, Daddy. I'm at the hospital with Ethan. The boy who saved me put me on speaker. She did. The voice that filled the room was rough. Not rough like gravel, rough like a mountain road at midnight on a bike doing 90. The kind of rough that comes from decades of hard living and harder choices and never once apologizing for either. Ethan Caldwell. My daughter tells me you took a bullet for her. Ethan's mouth went dry. I just, I couldn't let her get hurt. You could have run. Scarlett says the exit was closer. You ran toward the danger instead. Yes, sir. And she tells me you've been living in your car for 8 months. That true? Yes, sir. Silence on the other end. Heavy, controlled. The silence of a man processing information and making decisions simultaneously. The way some men play chess, 10 moves ahead before the first piece hits the board. I'm coming to that hospital. Don't move. The line went dead. Ethan looked at Scarlett. Is your dad going to kill me? She looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Part fear, part hope, part something ancient that lived in the space between fathers and daughters and the people who enter that space uninvited. I don't know what he's going to do, she said honestly. But when my dad decides something, the whole world moves. 2 hours later, the door to Ethan's room opened and a man filled the entire frame. There are large men. There are imposing men. And then there was Gunnar Donovan, who occupied space the way a thunderstorm occupies a sky not just present, but dominating the air itself, seeming to rearrange to accommodate him. 6'4", arms like bridge cables covered from wrist to shoulder in tattoos so dense they look like a second skin. A gray beard that fell to his chest, braided at the ends with small silver clasps. Eyes the color of a winter sky, pale blue, verging on gray, the kind of eyes that looked warm or terrifying, depending on what they were looking at. He was wearing his leather vest, the one covered in patches that told the story of a life Ethan couldn't begin to comprehend. Years of road, years of brotherhood, years of existing in a world that operated by its own rules, its own justice, its own definition of family. Hell's Angels stitched in an arc across the back large enough to read from across a room. Daddy, Scarlett stood. The word came out smaller than Ethan had ever heard her speak. Like the presence of her father compressed even her voice. Gunnar crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug that lifted her feet off the floor. His arms engulfed her completely. She disappeared into his chest like a small boat swallowed by a wave. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. Not crying, not Gunnar Donovan, but wet. Never again, he said. His voice was quiet, which was somehow more frightening than if he'd shouted. You're never going back to that school. Dad, I'm fine. I don't care. We'll homeschool you. Online classes. I'll hire the best tutors money can buy. But you are not going back to that building. Then he turned to Ethan. Up close, Gunnar was even more than the sum of his parts. The tattoos had texture-raised scars beneath the ink that told of injuries long healed. His hands were enormous, scarred across the knuckles. A thin white scar ran along at his jawline, disappearing into the gray beard. He smelled like motor oil and leather conditioner, like a man who had cleaned himself up in a hurry before driving to a hospital where his daughter was waiting. But his eyes were doing something Ethan didn't expect. They were studying him, not with aggression, not with judgment, with the careful, quiet intensity of a man trying to see past the surface to whatever truth lived underneath. And then something happened that Ethan almost missed, a flicker behind those winter eyes. Gunnar was looking at Ethan, but he was seeing someone else, someone from a long time ago, a boy with nothing. A boy the world had forgotten. Gunnar was seeing himself. Scarlett told me what you did, Gunnar said. Told me the exit was 10 feet away and you ran toward her instead. Ethan nodded. Words had left him. She also told me you've been living in a car, that you've got nobody, no family to discharge you to, no home to go back to. Ethan's throat was so tight he could barely breathe. Yes, sir. Gunnar looked at him for a long time. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the heart monitor seemed to quiet. Then something shifted in Gunnar's face. Something that went deeper than gratitude. Ethan saw it happen, a recognition like Gunnar was looking at his own reflection in a mirror set 30 years in the past. The look of a man who had once been exactly where Ethan was. Alone, invisible, surviving on nothing but stubbornness and the refusal to quit. Gunnar pulled out his phone and made a call without looking away from Ethan. Hank, it's Gunnar. I need you at Mercy General Hospital with the emergency guardianship paperwork. Pause. Yeah, the shooting. My daughter's fine, but the kid who saved her needs help. Another pause. 17. No parents. Homeless. I'm taking custody. Pause at home. I don't care what you have to do, Hank. Make it happen. I'll pay whatever it takes. Get here tonight. He hung up and looked at Ethan with those winter eyes. When they discharge you, you're coming home with us. That's not a suggestion. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The words wouldn't come. His brain was trying to process what was happening and failing like a computer given more information than its hardware could handle. But first, Gunnar said, and his voice changed, went softer. The edges rounded. The thunder receded. First, my brothers want to meet you. They're coming tomorrow morning, all of them. All of them, Ethan managed. How many brothers? Gunnar's mouth twitched. It was the closest thing to a smile Ethan had seen from him. I made some calls. 3 chapters. California, Nevada, Arizona. He paused. About 300 bikers, give or take. The room tilted. 300 what Hell's Angels, son? 300 Hell's Angels are riding through the night to be at this hospital tomorrow morning, to pay their respects to the kid who protected one of our own. Ethan stared at him. This was the morphine. This was the blood loss. This was his brain misfiring from trauma and surgery, and the simple impossibility of what he was hearing. Why he whispered. Gunnar leaned down, put one massive hand on Ethan's good shoulder. Careful, gentle, the hand of a man who understood that strength meant nothing if you couldn't control it. Because you had nothing and you gave everything. Because when everyone else ran away, you ran toward the danger. Because you chose my daughter's life over your own. His voice was barely above a whisper now. That's brotherhood, Ethan. That's family. And we take care of family. Scarlett was crying again, standing behind her father with her arms wrapped around herself, watching this massive, terrifying man kneel at the bedside of a boy she'd been secretly leaving shampoo for, and the expression on her face was something Ethan would remember for the rest of his life. It was the look of someone watching 2 broken pieces find each other across a room full of rubble. But underneath the gratitude, underneath the tears, there was something else in her eyes. Something older. Something that had been there since the morning her mother's closet stood empty. Fear. The quiet, persistent fear that the thing she loved most, her father's world, would consume everything it touched. That night after Gunnar left with promises to return at dawn, after the nurses dimmed the lights and the hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm of beeps and whispers and soft-soled shoes on linoleum, Scarlett sat in the chair beside Ethan's bed and didn't leave. They didn't speak for a long time. The silence between them was different now. No longer the silence of 2 people who didn't know each other, but the silence of 2 people who had been through something together that had burned away all the normal barriers. Small talk felt absurd. Surface conversation felt like a lie. So they sat in the quiet and let it hold them. Ethan's phone, recovered from his car and brought by a nurse, had 247 unread messages. He scrolled through them with his good hand, the screen casting blue light on his face in the darkened room. Classmates he'd never spoken to, teachers, the principal, news reporters from 3 different stations, people from other schools, complete strangers who had found his name online. The world had noticed him all at once like a spotlight swinging onto a stage he'd never asked to stand on. But one message stopped him. Lorraine, the waitress from the all-night diner across from the police station, the woman who poured coffee for insomniacs and truckers, and one teenage boy who sat in the parking lot at 3 in the morning because he had nowhere else to be. She had never asked him why he was there, just refilled his cup, and sometimes when the diner was empty, sat across from him and talked about nothing. The weather, her cats, the crossword she was stuck on. Normal things, human things. Saw the news, kiddo. Always knew you were special. You come by when you're healed. Breakfast is on me. Forever. Ethan was crying when Scarlett texted him from the chair 4 feet away, because apparently that was easier than speaking out loud. You awake? He looked at her. She was looking at her phone. He typed back, yeah, my dad just told me what he's planning for tomorrow. The 300 bikers. That's not even the half of it. What do you mean? She looked up from her phone, looked at him directly. Her dark eyes were still red, still swollen, but there was something in them now that hadn't been there before. Something like resolve. Get some sleep, she said. Tomorrow your whole life changes. Ethan texted back. It already changed. Scarlett's response came immediately. You have no idea. He set his phone down. Closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come. His mind was a carousel spinning too fast to stop. 300 bikers, gunner taking custody, a home to go to when they discharged him. The vest gunner mentioned honorary brother like, those words meant something so heavy, the leather itself would bend under them. And underneath all of it, deeper than the gratitude and the shock and the morphine haze, a question that had lived in Scarlett's eyes, all night unspoken but present, like a crack in a wall that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Her mother had left because of this world. Left a 10-year-old girl and a husband who loved her because the leather and the patches and the brotherhood had grown larger than the marriage. And now her father was pulling a stranger into that same world, offering it like a gift, like salvation, like the answer to everything Ethan had ever needed. Scarlett had watched her mother walk away from this once. She was terrified of watching it happen again. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight in the quiet hospital room, with the machines keeping count of his heartbeats and the distant sound of sirens that would never sound the same to him again, Ethan let himself feel something he hadn't felt in 8 months. Hope, fragile and dangerous and entirely new. He fell asleep holding it like a match in a windstorm. At 6:47 in the morning, Ethan was jolted awake by a sound that made the hospital windows rattle in their frames. It started distant, a rumble, low and steady like thunder rolling across a plain. But thunder fades. This grew, louder, deeper. The building itself began to vibrate, a fine tremor that traveled up through the bed frame and into Ethan's spine, and the water in the plastic cup on his nightstand began to ripple in concentric circles. A nurse burst through his door, eyes wide, stethoscope swinging from her neck. Are you Ethan Caldwell? You need to see this. She helped him into a wheelchair, careful with his shoulder, and pushed him to the window at the end of the hallway. Scarlett appeared from somewhere, still wearing the hospital blanket around her shoulders, and took the handles from the nurse. Below them, filling the hospital parking lot from edge to edge, spilling out onto the surrounding streets, blocking traffic in every direction, was an ocean of chrome and leather and American steel. Motorcycles, hundreds of them, more than Ethan could count, lined up in rows so precise they looked military, their chrome catching the early morning sun and throwing spears of light across the pavement. The riders stood beside their machines, motionless, each one wearing a leather vest heavy with patches. Some were enormous men with beards to their chests and arms like dock ropes. Some were women just as tall, just as fierce, with eyes that could cut glass. Some were young, barely older than Ethan, with fresh ink still dark on their skin. Some were old, gray-haired and weathered, standing with the rigid posture of men who had been through wars, both literal and personal. And every single motorcycle had a photograph taped to its handlebars. Ethan squinted. His own face stared back at him 300 times. His school ID photo taken last September, when he still had a home and a mother and the kind of naive hope that everything would work out. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard. 300 motorcycle engines cutting simultaneously. Not one at a time, not in waves. All at once, like the entire parking lot took a breath and held it. The silence that followed was so complete it felt holy. They wheeled him to the elevator, down to the main floor, through the lobby where nurses and patients and family members had gathered at the glass entrance doors. Phones raised recording something none of them fully understood. The automatic doors slid open. November air hit Ethan's face cold and sharp and smelling of exhaust and morning frost. Scarlett pushed his wheelchair out onto the concrete apron in front of the entrance. Every head in the parking lot turned toward him. 300 pairs of eyes locked onto the skinny kid in the wheelchair with the blood-soaked bandage visible through his hospital gown. The kid with the sling on his left arm and the dark circles under his eyes, and the look on his face of someone who has been told they won the lottery, but hasn't yet accepted that the ticket is real. Gunnar stepped forward. He was wearing his full colors. The leather vest was covered in patches that spoke a language Ethan didn't know but recognized as meaning. Years of road, years of loyalty, years of a life lived outside the lines that the rest of the world drew. He walked slowly toward the wheelchair, each step deliberate, each step a statement. When he reached Ethan, he stopped, looked down at him. Those pale winter eyes, the eyes of a man who had dismantled engines and reassembled lives with equal precision, studied the boy in the wheelchair for a long moment. Then Gunnar Donovan, president of the Hells Angels Desert, Chapter 2, 150 pounds of muscle and road-worn toughness, and a lifetime of being the most dangerous man in any room he entered, got down on one knee. The gesture moved through the crowd like a wave hitting a shore. 300 bikers knelt in unison. The sound of leather and denim hitting pavement echoed off the hospital walls and rolled across the parking lot and out into the street where traffic had stopped and drivers were stepping out of their cars to see what was happening. Some put their fists over their hearts. Some bowed their heads. Some closed their eyes. All of them knelt for a 17-year-old boy who had been sleeping in a Honda Civic and just wanted to make it to graduation. Ethan couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the image in front of him. 300 people on their knees. For him, for the kid nobody saw, for the boy who was invisible. Tears ran down his face and he didn't try to stop them. Didn't want to stop them. These tears had been building for 8 months, since the night he found his mother on the bathroom floor, since the landlord changed the locks, since the first night in the car when the cold crept in, and he realized that nobody in the world knew where he was or cared enough to find out. Gunnar spoke. His voice carried across the parking lot without shouting. The kind of voice that didn't need volume because it had authority. Ethan Caldwell, you had nothing. Society failed you. The system abandoned you. You've been surviving alone for 8 months, sleeping in a car, invisible to everyone around you, carrying your mother's ashes in a glove compartment because you couldn't afford to bury her. Ethan flinched. He hadn't told anyone about the ashes. Scarlett must have seen them. And when the moment came, Gunnar continued, when you could have saved yourself, when the exit was right there 10 feet from where you stood, you chose to save my daughter instead. You put your body between her and a bullet. That's not courage. That's not heroism. He paused. That's brotherhood. That's family. And we protect family. Gunnar reached into his vest and pulled out something folded. He shook it open. It was a leather vest. Black. Heavy. The leather was thick and new and had been worked by hand. Ethan could see the stitch marks where someone had sewn the patches with deliberate care. On the back, in carefully embroidered letters, honorary brother. Above it, the Hells Angels insignia. Below it, Ethan Caldwell. We don't give this lightly, Gunner said. Some men ride with us for 20 years and never earn it. But you earned it in 30 seconds. 30 seconds of choosing someone else's life over your own. That's more than most people give in a lifetime. He stood and carefully helped Ethan to his feet. Ethan swayed, still weak, still in pain, the morphine wearing off and the shoulder making itself known. But Scarlett was there instantly, her hand on his good arm steadying him. Her eyes were red, her lips were pressed together. She was watching her father drape the leather vest over the boy she had been secretly helping for weeks, and the expression on her face was a war between pride and something darker. Gunner held the vest open. May I? Ethan nodded because his voice had left him. Gunner slid the vest carefully over his good arm, then gently maneuvered it over the injured shoulder. The leather settled on Ethan's frame like something alive, heavy and warm and smelling of oil and road dust and belonging. The 300 rose to their feet as one. Then they roared, not with engines, with voices, cheering, shouting, chanting his name until the parking lot shook with it. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. One by one they approached. An older man with a gray ponytail shook Ethan's good hand. My grandson was in that school. You gave those kids time. Thank you. A woman with fierce green eyes and a scar from ear to chin hugged him gently. My son was killed in a school shooting 3 years ago. Nobody protected him. You protected Scarlett. You're a real one. They kept coming, each with a story, each with something to give. Envelopes pressed into Scarlett's hands because Ethan's arm was in a sling. A younger biker, maybe 30, who'd been homeless at Ethan's age. First and last month's rent. Another. College fund. Another. New clothes. The pile in Scarlett's arms grew until she was holding a tower of envelopes against her chest. Ethan was crying openly. Scarlett was crying. Even Gunner, standing behind them like a mountain with arms crossed, had moisture tracking through his gray beard. After an hour, after every single biker had paid their respects, Gunner raised his hand. Silence fell like a curtain. We ride. 300 engines roared to life simultaneously. The sound was primordial, vibration that bypassed the ears and went straight to the chest, to the bones, to something ancient and untamed. Every bike had Ethan's photo on the handlebars, a picture Scarlett must have taken from his school file. They were riding for him. 300 Hells Angels forming an honor procession for a kid who slept in a Honda Civic and fed tuna to a stray cat. Gunner helped Ethan onto the back of his motorcycle, a massive black and chrome beast that looked like it had been born from the road itself. Scarlett mounted her own bike beside them, smaller but no less powerful, her leather jacket back on her hair whipping in the morning wind. Hold on with your good arm, Gunner said. We're taking you home. They pulled out in formation, 2 long lines with Ethan in the center. They rode through town slowly, deliberately, like a funeral procession for the life Ethan was leaving behind and a celebration for the one he was riding toward. People on sidewalks stopped and stared, pulled out phones. A woman at a stoplight recognized Ethan from the news coverage and pressed her hand against her mouth, tears running down her face. They rode to an apartment complex Ethan had driven past 100 times. He had parked in its overflow lot once on a desperate night when every other spot was taken, and a security guard had knocked on his window at 2 in the morning and told him to move along. He had looked up at the lit windows and imagined the lives inside them. People sitting on couches, people cooking dinner, people sleeping in beds with sheets and pillows and walls around them. The apartments had seemed as unreachable as the stars, more so actually. He could see the stars from his car. They stopped in front of Building C, Apartment 2B. Scarlett dismounted and helped Ethan off Gunner's bike. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a key. Gold-colored, ordinary. The most extraordinary, ordinary thing Ethan had ever held. 1 year paid in full, she said, fully furnished, close to school, close to the bike shop where you start work next week. Ethan stared at the key in his palm, a piece of metal that weighed almost nothing and represented everything he hadn't had in 8 months. Walls. A door that locked from the inside. A bed. Privacy. Safety. Home. The money the brothers gave you, Gunnar said. Counted it this morning. $47,000. He let the number hang in the air. That's your college fund, your emergency fund, your never sleep in a car again fund. Ethan couldn't speak. His throat had sealed shut. 8 months of tears pressing against the back of his eyes, 8 months of holding everything together with nothing but stubbornness and routine. And now the dam was breaking, and there was nothing he could do but let it. They walked him upstairs. Scarlett unlocked the door. The apartment was small but perfect. A couch, soft and deep, the kind you sank into and didn't want to leave. A television mounted on the wall. A kitchen table with 2 chairs, real wood. A bedroom with an actual bed, queen-sized, with sheets and pillows, and a comforter thick enough to survive a winter. Ethan stood in the doorway of the bedroom and stared at it. "It's just a bed," Scarlett said. "No," Ethan said. "It's not." Because it wasn't. It was 8 months of sleeping folded in half. 8 months of waking with his neck locked and his spine aching. 8 months of dreaming about exactly this. A closet full of clothes and his size tags still on. A refrigerator stocked with real food. A pantry with pasta and rice, and a box of granola bars that made Ethan's throat close because granola bars were what he'd been living on, and now they were a backup, not a main course. On the kitchen table, a note in handwriting so heavy it had dented the paper. "This is your home now, son. You're not alone anymore. Sunday dinner's at my house, 5 p.m. Don't be late." Gunnar Ethan sat on the couch. His couch. The leather vest creaked as he leaned back. Scarlett sat beside him. Gunnar stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with those winter eyes that saw everything. "How do you feel?" Scarlett asked quietly. Ethan looked around at the walls that were his, at the door that locked from the inside, at the key on the table, at the vest that said he belonged somewhere, at Scarlett, who had saved him first with shampoo and silence, and who he had saved with his body and his blood, at Gunnar, who was calling him son like it was the most natural word in the world. "Like I'm dreaming," Ethan whispered. "You're not," Gunnar said. "This is real. You earned this, not with what you had, but with what you gave." He turned and walked out, his boots heavy on the stairs, leaving them alone in the apartment that was no longer empty because Ethan was in it. Scarlett didn't move from the couch. She sat close enough that their shoulders almost touched the borrowed warmth of her presence, filling the room the way the sun fills a window. But she wasn't smiling. Ethan noticed. In the middle of everything, surrounded by gifts and gratitude and the leather armor of brotherhood, Scarlett Donovan was not smiling. He watched her from the corner of his eye. Her jaw was set. Her hands were clasped in her lap, fingers interlocked so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She was staring at the vest draped over Ethan's shoulders with an expression that shifted between pride and something that looked a lot like grief. He thought about the note in her jacket pocket, the one from her mother. 3 sentences. "I love you. I can't do this anymore. Please forgive me." He thought about a 10-year-old girl waking up to an empty closet, about the sound of hangers swinging, about 7 years of carrying that note like a wound that wouldn't close. And he understood with the sudden clarity that trauma sometimes gives you that Scarlett was not afraid of what had happened yesterday. She was afraid of what was happening right now. She was watching her father pull a boy into the same world that had driven her mother away, watching the leather close around him, watching the brotherhood claim him. And somewhere deep in her chest, in the place where abandoned daughters keep their oldest fears, she was hearing those hangers swing again. Ethan wanted to say something, wanted to reach out and take her hand and tell her that he wasn't going to disappear into the leather, in the chrome, in the roar of 300 engines, that the vest on his shoulders didn't change who he was underneath it, that he saw her, or really saw her, the way she had seen him in that parking lot 3 weeks ago, when she figured out that the boy rotating his car through 5 different spots was sleeping in it. But the words wouldn't come. Not yet. The day had been too much, too loud, too enormous. His shoulder was throbbing. His body was exhausted. His mind was still trying to absorb the distance between yesterday morning when he was brushing his teeth in a McDonald's bathroom and right now sitting on a couch in an apartment with his name on a vest and $47,000 and a girl beside him who was quietly breaking apart. So he said the only thing he could. Thank you for the shampoo. Scarlett looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was still set. The war on her face was still being fought. You knew I figured it out. Second week. And you never said anything. You never said anything either. A silence. Then for the first time all day, the smallest crack in her armor. Not a smile, not yet, but the ghost of one. The suggestion that somewhere beneath the fear and the grief and the memory of empty hangars, there was still a girl who knew how to laugh. Fair enough, she said. They sat together on the couch in the apartment that was his, and outside the window, 300 motorcycles roared to life one last time as the brotherhood departed, the sound rolling across the city like a promise kept. The first week was a kind of vertigo. Ethan would wake up in the morning and for 3 or 4 seconds, he wouldn't know where he was. His body would brace for the steering wheel against his knees, the cramped fold of his spine, the cold air leaking through the car door seals. Then his hand would touch the sheets, cotton sheets, real sheets that smelled like laundry detergent, and the ceiling would come into focus above him, white and smooth and unchanging, and the reality would settle over him like a wave. He was in a bed, in an apartment, in a home. He would lie there and listen to the sounds that homes make. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the heater clicking on, a neighbor's door closing down the hall, the small mechanical symphony of a life lived inside walls, and he would press his hand against the mattress and feel it push back firm and supportive, and nothing like the driver's seat of a Honda Civic. Then the other sounds would come, the ones inside his head, the crack of a rifle, the scream of metal as a locker buckled, the rattle of a closet door against his spine. Brody's eye through the crack, red and empty and looking at him like he was already dead. Dr. Whitfield had warned him about this. PTSD, she said, is not a failure, it's a wound. And like any wound, it heals better when you treat it instead of ignoring it. She had given him the name of a therapist who specialized in trauma, a woman named Dr. Reynolds, with an office on Maple Street that had plants in the window and a couch so deep you could disappear into it. Ethan went to his first appointment on Tuesday. He sat on that couch and said nothing for 20 minutes. Dr. Reynolds didn't push. She sat across from him with her hands folded and her expression open and let the silence do what silence does. When you give it enough room, it makes space for the words that are afraid to come out. On the 21st minute, Ethan said, I can still feel the door against my back. The one in the closet. I can feel it pushing. That's where they started, the door, the pushing, the eye through the crack. Session by session, word by word, Ethan began to unpack the hallway the way you dismantle a bomb, carefully, slowly, with the understanding that one wrong move could detonate everything. Gunnar had taken therapy a step further. On the refrigerator, held in place by a magnet shaped like a motorcycle, was a note in Gunnar's heavy handwriting. Therapy appointment Tuesday 3 p.m. Non-negotiable. Trauma doesn't just disappear. We deal with it. Dad. Dad. The word had appeared without discussion. Gunnar used it as naturally as breathing. And Ethan didn't correct him because correcting him would have meant acknowledging how much the word hurt. Not because it was wrong, because it was right. Because Ethan had never had a father, and now a man who ran a motorcycle club and had hands the size of dinner plates was signing notes with that word like it had always belonged to him. He started work at Reaper's Customs on Monday. The shop was a converted warehouse on Industrial Drive, 3 bays wide, Oil stains on the concrete floor so old they'd become part of the architecture. The walls were covered with photographs. Gunnar on his first bike at 19. The chapter at a rally in Sturgis, rows of leather and chrome against a Dakota sunset. Scarlett at age 4 sitting on a motorcycle seat with a helmet that covered her entire head, grinning so wide her face couldn't contain it. Gunnar started him on basic tasks: oil changes, tire rotations, brake pad inspections. Not because Ethan wasn't capable of more, but because Gunnar believed in foundations. You build from the ground up, he said, handing Ethan a wrench. Rush the foundation and the whole thing falls over. That's true for engines. That's true for people. Ethan liked the work, liked the grease under his fingernails and the resistance of a bolt that did not want to turn, and the satisfaction of making something broken run again. The HVAC certificate was still his plan, but the motorcycle shop was his present, and the present felt good in a way he wasn't used to. The other mechanics accepted him without ceremony. A nod, a nickname, a cup of coffee placed on his workbench without being asked for. These were men who communicated in the language of doing rather than saying, and Ethan, who had survived 8 months on silence and routine, spoke that language fluently. But Scarlett was pulling away. It started small. She stopped coming to the shop after school, stopped texting him in the evenings. At school, she returned to her old pattern, head-down jacket, on speaking to no one, including him. On Monday, she walked past his desk without a glance. On Wednesday, he found a granola bar in his locker and didn't know if it was affection or a goodbye. Ethan tried to catch her eye in class. She studied her notebook. He texted her. Single words came back. Fine. Busy. Later. By the end of the second week, the silence between them had grown solid. Not the comfortable silence they'd shared in the hospital room, the kind that held you instead of hurting you. This silence was a wall. Scarlett had built it deliberately brick by brick, and Ethan could feel himself being shut out. He didn't understand. 2 weeks ago, she had been the one holding his hand in a hospital bed, the one who refused to leave, the one who collected envelopes from 300 bikers and put a key in his palm and said, "This is your home now." And now she couldn't look at him without something dark crossing her face. On a Thursday evening, Ethan was cleaning up after his shift at the shop when Gunnar appeared in the bay doorway. The older man had a way of appearing that made you feel like the room had reorganized itself to accommodate him. He didn't walk through doors so much as the doors widened. "You notice anything about Scarlett?" Gunnar asked. He wasn't looking at Ethan. He was looking at the motorcycle on the lift, a vintage panhead that a client wanted restored to its original glory. His hands were deep in his pockets, which Ethan had learned was Gunnar's version of vulnerability. Hands in pockets meant the armor was down, meant the man behind the mountain was showing. "She's been quiet," Ethan said. He wiped his hands on the shop rag draped over the workbench. The grease had gotten into the lines of his palms, into the creases of his knuckles, and he liked it. Liked the evidence of work done. Liked the proof that his hands were useful. Quiet's her default. This is something else. Gunnar turned from the bike. His eyes were troubled in a way Ethan hadn't seen before. Gunnar's eyes were usually certain, the eyes of a man who had made every decision in his life without looking back. But tonight they held doubt, and doubt on Gunnar Donovan's face was like cracks in a mountain. "She won't talk to me," Ethan said. "She won't talk to me either." Gunnar's jaw tightened. His beard moved with it, silver threads catching the fluorescent light. "And that scares me more than anything that happened at that school. Because bullets I understand. Silence from my daughter I don't." They stood in the bay surrounded by the smell of oil and metal and the cooling concrete of a November evening. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed their constant, mindless song. A radio somewhere in the back was playing country music turned low, a man singing about roads and loss and the particular loneliness of arriving somewhere with nobody waiting. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. Gunnar nodded. "Scarlett's mom. What happened?" The silence that followed was different from Scarlett's silence. Scarlett's was a wall. Gunner's was an ocean, deep and dark and full of things that lived at the bottom where the light didn't reach. Carolyn Gunner said her name was Caroline. He pulled his hands from his pockets and crossed his arms. We met when I was 24. She was 22. Bartender at a place called The Rail in Kingman. Prettiest woman I'd ever seen. Smartest, too. She knew exactly what I was when she married me. Knew about the club, the life. She thought she could handle it. I thought I could have both worlds. Her and the road. Love and leather. Turns out that's the oldest lie men tell themselves. What changed? Gunner looked at the floor. Scarlet. When you become a father, the world gets smaller. In a clear way. You can see what matters. And Caroline could see that the club was pulling me away from the thing that mattered most. She asked me to step back. Be a father first and a president second. She wasn't asking me to quit. She was asking me to choose. And you didn't. Gunner's jaw worked. I was too proud, too young, too stupid. I told her the club was my family, that it made us safe, that she didn't understand. He paused. The most dangerous words a man can say to the woman he loves. You don't understand, because what he's really saying is, your feelings don't matter. So she left. Packed a bag while Scarlett was asleep. Left a note. 3 sentences. Gunner recited them from memory, and Ethan heard echoes of Scarlett's voice in every word. I love you. I can't do this anymore. Please forgive me. Scarlett was 10. Gunner nodded. And she's been paying for my mistake ever since. Every friendship she doesn't make. Every person she keeps at arm's length. Every time she puts on that jacket like it's armor. That's on me. The radio played a fiddle solo. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere in the shop, a wrench dropped on concrete and rang like a bell. She's afraid, Ethan said. He understood now. The wall Scarlett was building wasn't against him. It was against the pattern, the cycle. Her father's world had consumed her mother. Now her father was pulling Ethan into that world, and Scarlett was watching the same story start again with different characters. She's terrified, Gunner confirmed, and she's right to be. He looked at Ethan directly. I brought you into this because I saw myself in you, a kid with nothing, a kid the world forgot. I wanted to give you what nobody gave me, but I didn't think about what it looked like from her side. From where she stands, I'm doing the same thing I did with her mother, choosing the brotherhood over the people I love. The admission hung in the air, heavy, real. The kind of truth that costs something to say. What do I do? Ethan asked. Gunner shook his head. This isn't your problem to solve. It's mine. I'm the one who broke it. But I need you to understand something. He uncrossed his arms. You're not in this family because of the best. You're not in this family because of what happened at that school. You're in this family because Scarlett chose you before I ever did. She saw you. She helped you. She cared about you before she even knew your name. And I will not let my pride destroy another relationship that matters to my daughter. He turned and walked out of the bay. His boots echoed on the concrete. The bay door rolled down behind him with a metallic rattle that sounded final. The next morning, Ethan found Scarlett in the school parking lot. She was sitting in her truck engine off, staring at the steering wheel with the focused intensity of someone who was trying very hard not to look at anything else. Her leather jacket was zipped to her chin despite the mild morning. Her hair was down, covering half her face like a curtain pulled across a window. She looked like she had built a fortress out of her own body and was daring the world to try the door. Ethan knocked on the passenger window. She didn't look up. He knocked again harder. She closed her eyes for a moment, and he could see her deciding, weighing the cost of letting him in against the cost of keeping him out. Then she reached across and unlocked the door. He got in. The cab of her truck smelled like motor oil and vanilla, a combination that shouldn't have worked, but did the way Scarlett herself shouldn't have worked, but did. A pine tree air freshener hung from the mirror, dried out and curled, a relic from some earlier attempt at normalcy. On the dashboard, a photo was tucked into the sun visor. A woman with dark hair and Scarlett's exact eyes holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The baby was reaching for the woman's face with one tiny hand. The woman was smiling. Caroline. Before. Before the note. Before the empty closet. Before the world contracted to 3 sentences in a 7-year silence. I talked to your dad last night, Ethan said. Scarlett's jaw tightened. About what? About your mom. About why you're afraid. About why you've been pushing me away. She still wouldn't look at him. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel even though the truck wasn't running. White knuckles, rigid arms. You don't know what it's like, she said. Her voice was low, controlled. You don't know what it's like to love someone and watch them get swallowed by it. The leather, the patches, the brotherhood. It eats people, Ethan. It starts as a gift, then becomes an obligation, then becomes your whole identity. She paused, took a breath that shook. I was 10 years old when my mom left. I woke up and her closet was empty. The hangers were still swinging. Click, click, click. She left a note. 3 sentences. I've been carrying it in my jacket pocket for 7 years. I love you. I can't do this anymore. Please forgive me. 3 sentences. That's all I was worth. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. And now here's my dad pulling you into the same world, giving you the vest, calling you son, and you're going to love it. I can see it already. And one day it's going to be bigger than me, bigger than us. And I'm going to be 10 years old again, listening to hangers swing. The words came out in a rush, and when they were done, Scarlett pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and went silent. The stillness of someone who has said the worst thing they know and is waiting to see what survives. Ethan sat in the passenger seat of a truck that smelled like vanilla and oil and watched the girl who had saved him first before the bullets was, before the bikers, before any of it break apart. He thought about what to say, thought about all the right words and the wrong ones and the ones that fell somewhere in between. Thought about the night he found his mother and the 8 months that followed and the fact that he had survived not because he was strong, but because he refused to stop moving. I'm not your father, Ethan said. Scarlett didn't lift her head. I'm not your mother either. I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to get swallowed by anything. He paused. You want to know why? She looked up. Her eyes were red. Her cheeks were wet. The armor had cracked and underneath it was just a girl. A 17-year-old girl who missed her mother and loved her father and was terrified that caring about anyone meant losing them. Because I've already lost everything, Ethan said. I've had nothing. Slept in a car, brushed my teeth in a McDonald's bathroom, ate granola bars for dinner and fed tuna to a stray cat because he was the only living thing that showed up for me every day. I know what it looks like when everything disappears. And I'm never going to be the reason someone else feels that way, especially not you. She stared at him. The war in her eyes was still there, but the battle lines had shifted. Something was giving way. You left shampoo in my locker, Ethan said. You left socks and granola bars and a toothbrush. You never said a word. Never asked for anything. Never even let me know it was you. That's not brotherhood. That's not the club. That's just you. That's who you are without the vest and the patches and the motorcycle. That's the person I ran toward in that hallway. Not the Hell's Angels' daughter. Just you. Scarlett's face crumpled. Not dramatically. Not with a sea or a whale. Just a slow collapse like a wall that had been holding back water for 7 years, finally letting it through. Tears ran down her face and she let them. Didn't wipe them. Didn't look away. Your dad told me something last night, Ethan said. He said you chose me before he did. Before the shooting, before any of it. He said the shampoo was a choice, the socks were a choice. Every time you looked the other way when I parked in a different spot that was a choice, you chose to see me when nobody else did. She closed her eyes. A tear tracked down her jaw and fell onto her leather jacket. The jacket that was armor. The jacket her mother had never worn. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. So am I. Of what? Of having something to lose. Ethan's voice cracked. For 8 months I had nothing. No home, no family, no one who'd notice if I disappeared. And that was terrible, but it was safe. Because you can't lose what you don't have. And now I have an apartment and a man who calls me son and $47,000 in a bank account and a girl who puts shampoo in my locker. And I'm terrified every single day because now there's something the world can take away. Scarlett opened her eyes, looked at him, really looked the way she had in the parking lot the first time they spoke with that intensity that made the hair on his arm stand up. So what do we do? She asked. We do what your dad should have done with your mom, Ethan said. We don't choose the leather over the people. We don't let the brotherhood be bigger than us. And when it gets hard, when the world gets loud and the club gets heavy and the fear starts building, we tell each other. We don't write 3-sentence notes and disappear. Scarlett was quiet for a long time. The school bell rang in the distance. First period. Students were streaming past the truck, backpacks, bouncing phones, glowing oblivious to the two people inside having the most important conversation of their lives. I was the one who told my dad about your mom's ashes, Scarlett said. In the glove compartment. I saw them when I was checking on your car one night. I know. Are you mad? No. He meant it. I'm glad someone saw them. She reached across the cab and took his good hand. Her fingers were cold like they always were, but her grip was firm. She held on like she was making a decision. Like the act of reaching for someone's hand was the opposite of writing a 3-sentence note and leaving. My dad wants us at Sunday dinner, she said. 5 o'clock. He's making ribs. I know. The note on the fridge. He's going to say something to me about my mom, about what happened. He told me last night he had something he needed to say to me, and I could tell it was going to be big. Do you want me there? She squeezed his hand. Yes. Sunday evening, 5 o'clock, Gunner's house on Ridgeback Road. The compound looked different in the evening light, softer. The motorcycles in the driveway cast long shadows that stretched toward the house. The air smelled like mesquite smoke and charring meat. The driveway was full of motorcycles, but fewer than 300. These were the inner circle, men and women who had ridden with Gunner for decades. Hank the lawyer was there, 2 older bikers from the honor ride. Lorraine carried a casserole dish because apparently she had adopted the entire Donovan family. The dining room table was long and heavy built from reclaimed wood that Gunner had salvaged from a barn in Nevada and spent 3 months sanding and finishing by hand. It sat 12 and every seat was full. Scarlett sat next to Ethan. Gunner sat at the head. Before they ate, Gunner stood. The room went quiet the way rooms do when he stands. Not because people are afraid, because people listen. I need to say something, he began. His voice was different tonight. Stripped of the authority, stripped of the command, just a man standing in his dining room looking at his daughter with eyes that held more regret than a single lifetime should contain. Scarlett, what I'm about to say I should have said 7 years ago. Every day I didn't say it was a day I failed you. Scarlett went still. Ethan felt her hand tighten on his under the table. Your mother didn't leave because of the club. She didn't leave because she was weak or because she didn't love you. She left because I was too proud to listen, too proud to change. She asked me to be a father first, and I chose to be a president first. That was my failure. Not hers, not yours, mine. The table was silent. Lorraine had set down her fork. 2 of the older bikers were looking at the table, jaws, tight eyes glassy. I spent 7 years letting you blame yourself. Gunner continued. His voice was steady, but the cost was visible in his hands gripping the table's edge. Letting you think you weren't enough to make her stay. Letting you carry that note in your pocket like a wound you were too afraid to look at. And that is the worst thing I have ever done. Worse than anything the road ever put in front of me. Because I watched my daughter grow up believing she was unlovable, and I had the power to stop it, and I didn't. because saying the truth meant admitting I was wrong. His voice broke on the last word, a fissure in the mountain that ran all the way to the foundation. You are enough, Scarlett. You were always enough. Your mother loved you. I love you. And this boy sitting next to you, he didn't run toward that hallway for the Hells Angels' daughter. He ran for you. The same girl who puts shampoo in lockers and feeds stray cats and sees invisible people. You, just you. Scarlett was crying, not hiding it, not fighting it, letting the tears fall onto the reclaimed wood table in Gunner's dining room, while 12 people who had chosen this family sat in respectful silence and let the moment be what it needed to be. Ethan put his arm around her, his good arm, the one that still worked, and she leaned into him, the leather of her jacket pressing against the cotton of his shirt, and for the first time in 7 years, the girl who wore armor let someone hold her without it. Gunner looked at Ethan. Will you say grace? Ethan had never said grace in his life. Had never sat at a table this large or this full or this quiet with expectation. But he tried. Thank you for this food, for this family, for second chances and people who show up when it matters, for being seen when you have been invisible, for homes that aren't just buildings but people who choose you, and for the courage to say the things we should have said a long time ago. Amen, Gunner said. Amen. The table echoed. Glasses were raised, food was served, ribs and potatoes and cornbread and Lorraine's casserole, which turned out to be mac and cheese so good it made two grown bikers argue about the recipe. Laughter filled the room. Stories were told. Gunner sat at the head of the table and watched his daughter laugh for the first time in weeks, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who had finally stopped carrying a weight he should have set down years ago. After dinner, Ethan and Scarlett walked outside. The November sky was clear. Stars everywhere. Orion's belt visible above the tree line, 3 bright points in a row. I named the cat after that constellation, Ethan said. I know. I saw you looking up at it one night from the parking lot. You were sitting on the hood of your car, head tilted back, and you looked so small. Like the universe was enormous, and you were just a tiny point in the middle of it. That was the night I decided to help you. What made you decide that you look lonely? Not just deeply alone, the kind of alone that isn't about being by yourself. It's about knowing nobody is coming. And I knew that look because I've been wearing it for 7 years. You're not lonely anymore, Ethan said. Scarlett looked at him. The starlight caught the wings tattooed on her neck, turning them silver. Neither are you. They stood in the driveway, surrounded by motorcycles and starlight, and the distant sound of laughter from inside the house where Lorraine was winning an argument about mac and cheese, and Ethan thought about the distance between who he was 8 months ago and who he was now. A boy sleeping in a Honda Civic. A boy wearing a leather vest. A boy who had a key to a door that was his, and a mouse and a man who called him son, and a girl who had saved him with shampoo before he saved her with his body. That evening, back at his apartment, Ethan made one last trip to the Honda Civic. It was parked in the guest spot. Under the interior light, everything was exactly as he'd left it. The safety pin backpack, the Ziploc bag of toiletries, the blanket folded on the passenger seat, the stain from a spilled chocolate milk he'd never cleaned. He sat in the driver's seat one final time, felt the groove where his body had pressed night after night for 8 months, ran his hand over the worn upholstery, opened the glove compartment. His mother's ashes were still there, the cardboard box light and plain. He lifted it carefully, cradled it against his chest. He picked up the box, held it against his chest. I got a place now, Mom, he said quietly. I got a bed and a kitchen and a door that locks. I got people who care about me. A man who calls me son. A girl who sees me. I think you'd like her. She's fierce like you were before. He paused. I'm not mad at you anymore. I was, those first nights in the car, angry at you for the needle, angry at you for leaving me. But I'm not angry now. I'm just sad that you'll never see any of this. He held the box for a while. Then he saw Orion. The cat, limping out from behind the dumpster torn ear and all meowing with the specific indignation of a creature who has been kept waiting and intends to make that clear. Ethan got out and opened a can of tuna he'd brought from his kitchen. His kitchen. He set it on the ground and watched the cat eat. I'm not forgetting about you, buddy. I know what it's like to need someone to show up. The cat purred and wound around his legs. Ethan looked up at the window of apartment 2B. The light was on. He'd left it on because he could, because it was his electricity, his apartment, his life. His phone buzzed. Text from Colton, his brother, the one in Colorado who had left to save himself and had been silent for months until the news put Ethan's face on every screen in the country. Saw everything, the shooting, the bikers, the apartment. Little bro, I'm proud of you. Mom would be too. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Ethan read the message 3 times. His brother's voice came through in the rhythm of the words, the same Colton who used to make him cereal before school and check under his bed for monsters. He typed back, I got a home now. You always deserve one. Can I visit? I'm never leaving again. The words on the screen blurred. I'm never leaving again. 6 words. More than the 3 his mother left. Enough to start. Yeah, come whenever you want. There's a couch with your name on it. He walked back upstairs, set his mother's ashes on the shelf in his bedroom next to the framed community college acceptance letter and the business card from Reaper's Customs and a photograph Scarlett had given him that afternoon. A Polaroid she'd taken of the 2 of them on the porch of Gunner's house, Sunday light on their faces, her arm around his shoulders. Both of them caught mid-laugh about something he couldn't remember, but would never forget. He lay down in his bed. His bed. The comforter was thick and warm and smelled like nothing, not car seats, not McDonald's bathrooms, not industrial cleaner, just clean cotton and the faint lavender of fabric softener. The most ordinary smell in the world, the most extraordinary thing he had ever experienced. His phone buzzed one last time. Scarlett. Good night, brother. The word was different now. Not the brotherhood of leather and chrome and 300 kneeling bikers. Something quieter, something older. The brotherhood of 2 people who had seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay. Ethan set his phone on the nightstand, closed his eyes. The nightmares would still come. He knew that. The hallway, the gun, Brody's empty eye through the crack, the sound of the door rattling against his spine. These things would visit him in the dark for months, maybe years. Dr. Whitfield had said so. The therapist had confirmed it. Healing was not a straight line. It was a spiral circling back through the pain again and again, each time from a slightly greater distance. But when he woke gasping in the dark, he would not be in a car. He would be in a bed in a home surrounded by people who had chosen him. And that would not make the nightmare stop, but it would make the waking bearable. Because for the first time in 17 years, Ethan Caldwell was not invisible. 300 people had made sure of that. A girl with a leather jacket and wings tattooed on her neck had made sure of that. A man with winter eyes and a broken heart and enough pride to fill a canyon, but also enough courage to set that pride down in front of his daughter and say, I was wrong, had made sure of that. And in a world that had tried to forget him, that had taken his mother and his home and his childhood and nearly his life, Ethan found the one thing that no amount of loss can destroy. He found family. Not the kind you're born into, the kind that kneels for you, the kind that leaves shampoo in your locker, the kind that says you're one of ours now and means it with every stitch of leather and every mile of road and every Sunday dinner, where someone says grace for the first time and means every word. Ethan fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, about the bike shop and school and Sunday dinners and the therapy appointment on Tuesday that was non-negotiable, about Colton visiting next month, about Scarlett's laugh at the dinner table, about Lorraine's mac and cheese, about Orion the cat who would be waiting by the dumpster tomorrow with his torn ear and his limp and his small persistent faith that someone would show up with tuna. And for the first time in 8 months, Ethan dreamed not of survival, but of life.